Okay, welcome back. So it gives us immense pleasure to welcome Vix to BeerCon2. And Vix is going to talk about, I guess, the first year of your journey in cybersec. So over to you, Vix. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, I am Vix, and I'll be talking about the lessons that I've learned during my first year in cybersecurity with a subtitle of Tales of an Exhausted Pigeon. So I really hope that everyone enjoys bird metaphors and bird puns because my talk is littered with them. So to start off, who am I? Well, like I said, my name is Vix. I am the cybersecurity specialist at the University of Stirling, and I am also currently undertaking a graduate apprenticeship in a master's degree in cybersecurity at the University of Strathclyde. Now, I am in the very fortunate position that I am the very first person in a cybersecurity specific role within my organization. Before I joined the organization in this position, the responsibility for cybersecurity lied with many different parts of our different teams, and they were jointly coming together in order to manage that. I was brought into the organization and given this opportunity to develop myself and my skills whilst in the role in order to kind of bring all of that effort together and be the first person within a cybersecurity specialist role at the organization. So, what do I do, you might ask? Well, a little bit of everything. I cover everything from policy and process to incident response. I create user awareness materials and run information sessions. I have to comply with various frameworks. I do risk management, data protection. I helped implement and run a SIEM at our university. We do some vulnerability management, and I'm involved in business continuity, just to name a few of the things that I am involved in, participate in, or lead on. So that's all to say that I found myself relating heavily with this post when I saw it pop up on Facebook once. I know that makes me sound like a bit of a boomer, but there we are. So I am not an early bird or a night owl. I am just a form of a permanently exhausted pigeon. But through all of that exhaustion over my first year of cybersecurity, I have learned quite a lot in terms of security and in life. So I'd like to impart you with some wisdom, covering sort of three main areas. So I'll be looking at things that I've learned about education and industry, building a career, and the community. We'll be starting off with education and industry. And before I dive into it, I'd actually like to note that this is my third run at doing a university degree. I first started off with a bachelor's in psychology. I then went on and worked in hotels for a bit because it turns out that you can't really do much with a degree in psychology. I then decided that it wasn't for me. Hospitality definitely wasn't my thing, but I loved to know how people work and I also love computers. So I decided to shift into IT. I did a master's program in information technology, which was a conversion course and lasted about 1 year, and then worked as an IT support specialist on a service desk. Once I was in IT, I realized that I'd like to join those two things together and do a bit of psychology and IT, mash it together, and decided on cybersecurity. So I applied for my role, managed to land it, and I am now doing a master's program while doing a full-time job. So the things that I've learned are that a degree education is something that can only take you so far, really. Um, I know that a degree is often necessitated by job requirements, and it is increasingly important when you need to move up the ladder in an organization. But what it really does is it gives you the foundational knowledge that you might need in order to succeed. You might learn the necessary writing and research skills that you might employ in your workplace. And it gives you a quantifiable way of measuring your achievements. It also helps you get your foot in the door where you might otherwise not have an opportunity to. And Ultimately, that is all to say that when you're learning on the job, you're applying that theory and putting it into practice. And one of the most important things that I learned through doing both university and working at the same time is that although university is absolutely great at teaching you things the right way and teaching you how to comply with certain standards and teaching you how to learn different tool sets or perhaps apply skills to different things, some of the things that you can't learn in a university setting is effective communication. A huge part of our jobs is to be able to effectively communicate risks upwards so that our senior managers will invest in the appropriate tools and technologies that we need to push our organizations forward. But we also need to be able to speak to our users and effectively communicate what they need to do in order to secure our systems. And what I've also learned during my time at work is that although university can teach you how to use a variety of tools, learning on the job actually gives you the power to use the right tools for your environment. So it is absolutely great that when people picture a hacker or a person in cybersecurity, they think of Unix-based systems and all of the fancy things that come with that. You really need to be able to use the tools that suit your environment within your organization. So getting well equipped and well known with things like your Windows operating system and the things that lie within a Microsoft environment, for example, are really important if you're going to be communicating those risks to your users. Another thing that my job has allowed me to do is mentor and perhaps sometimes manage others in a less formal capacity. So I had the opportunity to mentor a student that was on the Cyber First placement scheme. And that helped me learn a lot about myself, my sort of mentoring style, as well as the way that people learn efficiently. And that is not something that I necessarily would have gotten through a degree education. Ultimately, there is a lot of training beyond a degree education as well. There are certifications, there are loads of other things that you can learn online in just simple training platforms, through YouTube, through a variety of other means. And it's really important to know that a degree education needs to be in tandem with all of these other things in order for everything to actually click. So that is to say that the main things that I've learned through this process of learning both on the job and through a degree is that technical proficiency shouldn't hold you back. I know that there is this sort of stigma around certain things like not being technical enough for a role, but I have both surprised myself and pleasantly been surprised by other people who are able to comply with certain standards or employ best practice without necessarily having the technical skill there. But I also know that from my degree education, I am quite technical and I can be technical when I need to be. It's just important to know when it's the right time to use those skills. Another thing that I've learned is that although university can teach you specifically how to comply with certain things, my job has taught me that compliance doesn't always mean security. It's so important that our people are at the core of what we do. And it's important to be able to communicate effectively with them and train them and be able to understand how they're using our systems and processes. Because one simple failing of human error can certainly bring down the entire house. Another thing that I've learned is that security is not optional. I know that some people would like for it to be, but sometimes we just really need to effectively communicate the fact that it just isn't, and we have to enforce certain things. And the greatest lesson that I've learned out of all of this is not to try and fit a square peg into a round hole. And that is to say that you really need to know yourself and know your learning style and know where you want to pick certain things up from. Because, for example, I've learned that I don't particularly like academia after doing my third degree and that other training options are much more suitable to me. I'm a much more practical learner, and I know that I am more effective when I learn things practically on my own. So I know that I need to be able to do those things in order to succeed in life. Moving on then to the lessons I've learned while trying to build a career. To reflect back on the sort of previous topic, you really need to know what kind of training opportunities are out there and what suits your learning style. So I was very, very fortunate in the fact that my job opportunity arose at the correct time. But I knew that I needed this degree in order to further myself and get a foot in the door because I didn't have any specific cybersecurity experience before. But if you are starting from scratch, it's important to know that that's not the only route. There are other ways of getting into the industry. And just because a bunch of people around you might have a degree, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need one. And you can gain those skills elsewhere. Another important thing to remember is that everyone brings a unique point of view, and that is really important. My background is quite mixed. You know, I came from a sort of customer service, hospitality, psychology background. I then swung into IT, and I brought that side of things to what I do at work today. And all of those sorts of things are important in bringing a balanced view and approach to your work. It is not only the harsh technical skills that are needed, but soft skills as well, as I know that Sean has said before. And I just really think that that's an important thing because a lot of people can feel a bit downtrodden about perhaps not being from the right background. Another important thing is to gather evidence of your work. And this is something that I want to work on. But just as important as getting experience in the field is actually evidencing that experience and what you're doing in your free time or perhaps just in your training is really important. So perhaps starting a blog and putting that out there, giving talks at conferences, you know, publicizing yourself on LinkedIn and what you're doing. It can certainly help give you the reach that you need, and it always feels good to have something to reflect on and to see what you've done in the past and how that has helped you grow. One of the most important things for me was being able to seize the moment. Like I've said before, I was very fortunate that my job opportunity arose at the correct time. But there are a number of things in my life that I've done that I feel like I have taken the correct opportunity at the correct time. And it's important to be aware of the opportunities that are around you when it comes to building a career. And of course, you need to engage with others in the industry. You cannot succeed in solitary confinement, so to speak. You need to be able to speak to others, get to know people, make sure that you're learning from other people as well. Lastly, I'd like to talk a little bit about community. The most important thing to take away here is that you need to get yourself on the Bird app, which is of course Twitter. But community is honestly the best resource that there is out there in terms of actually furthering your career, getting lots of training materials, and getting to know people in the industry. There are lots of different platforms where people join to communicate, such as Twitter and Discord and Slack, and it's important to join those communities so that you can speak to other like-minded people. One of the best things that I've learned during this process is that everyone is an imposter or feels like one. And it was so nice to hear that and be able to know that it's not just me that feels this way. I think it's easy to think that because you've only had so much experience in a certain industry that you might not have something important to say, but I think everyone feels that way to a certain degree. Of course, there's lots of mentorship and training opportunities, and everyone is really inclusive and welcome. And there are safe and inclusive spaces for all. So There are a lot of groups that are dedicated specifically to minority groups, for example, where you can have a safe and comfortable space to speak to each other and learn from each other. Of course, one of the important things are conferences, CTFs and hackathons. So conferences like the ones thrown today really show the importance of community and the very positive side of community, where we can help each other, magnify each other, amplify each other, and really help each other along. One of the coolest things that I never thought would happen to me at all within the first year of dipping my toe into this is being quoted by Forbes. So just by seizing the opportunity of speaking to the right people on Twitter, I managed to actually be quoted in an article on Forbes about K-pop and cyber threats. And I know it's a bit of a risky move to out myself as a K-pop stan, but here I am. And I really never thought that those two things would overlap. But as one of my friends so kindly said, there's a Venn diagram for everyone. So in conclusion, I'd just like to leave you with the 5 main lessons that I've learned through bird metaphors. The first one is get out there and test your wings. So education and academia can only take you so far, but you really need to practice your skills and put yourself out there. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you need a job in order to be able to do these things. There are a lot of things that you can do in your own time and blog about online, or a lot of things that you can experience without necessarily having to be in a job. And it's important that you move past just the theory and putting it into practice. Don't chicken out, especially don't chicken out of things because you feel that you might not be technical enough. It's important to know that everyone has very important skills, and you need to be able to get past that in order to thrive in the community. The early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. This is to say that you need to seize the opportunities that you're given at the right time, and do not wait for things to happen to you. Had I not signed up for this wonderful conference, for example, I would not be speaking to everyone and getting some experience and talking. Had I not gotten on Twitter and engaged with the community, I wouldn't have even known that BeerCon exists. So it's really important that you seize the opportunity at the right time. Don't count your chickens before they've hatched. This is to say that compliance does not necessarily mean security. And you cannot be assured that you will be secure because you comply with a certain framework. You really need to focus on all 3 things, which are people, processes, and technology, and make sure that you're giving a good amount of attention to your people especially. And lastly, birds of a feather flock together. So that is just to reinforce this idea of community and how important it is, and that you really need to engage with the community if you want to have a really fulfilling career in InfoSec. So that's me. One of the things that I'm going to try and do is learn from my lessons and actually start a blog. So I've secured a domain and it's empty right now, but I will be blogging in future. So you can check that out at cybersecv.com. You can follow me on Twitter at cybersecv, and I'll be on Slack to answer any questions. And I'd really just like to thank the beer farmers and our lovely mentors and everyone else involved in running this amazing event.
Thank you very much, Vix. Really, really kind of you to share those words at the end. Brilliant talk. Really, really cool. And I can't thank you enough. We have got a few questions, which I'm just trying to get my hands on right now. Bear with me one sec. All right. So these have come in from the...
That last slide again, Vix, so that people can... Perfect.
Sorry.
Right. All right. So yeah, a couple of questions that have come in from the Twitch, and actually one of them was going to be one I was going to ask you anyway. On your first slide, you kind of who am I slide, you listed a bunch of stuff, a huge bunch of stuff, And it indicated to me this idea that, and I think a lot of us have been there, that you're a bit of a jack of all trades.
Oh yeah.
The whole idea that you can dabble in a lot of different things. So I guess the question which came from Nikos was, how do you handle being a single point of decision, and then potentially a single point of failure if an incident occurs?
Yeah, so I suppose the important thing there is that I have line management who are hugely supportive, and that is a huge help because although I hold a lot of responsibility within my organization, I can still defer to people above me in order to sort of cushion me should I fall. So it's really important to have a good relationship with senior management and have their backing and support in order to know that any decision that you make is supported and is correct and possibly has another way of going, I guess, so to say. And in terms of being a single point of failure, I try to mitigate that by bringing all of the people from our disparate teams together. I actually run a sort of weekly meeting where I just grab everyone involved in any of my security projects together. And we talk about what we're working on. We've built up a little team. And it's important that everyone has the right responsibilities and the right mindset in order to help work together. And that kind of mitigates the effect of being a single point of failure because everyone knows what they're responsible for. People have someone to turn to in all sorts of events. So it's really helpful and positive that way.
Yeah, brilliant. Great answer. Thank you. Another question from Tia, which is a really cool question, I think. Do you have any tips or advice around communication with diverse audiences, such as those at a university? Particularly when in industry, there are a lot of common goals and objectives, but maybe not so much in the university or academic environment.
Yeah, we're definitely an odd bunch. I think that especially this sort of technical skill levels can vary so much. I've had to speak to infrastructure specialists all the way down to students just joining the university who don't really know how to work an iPhone. And it's really important to be able to tailor that communication style to the appropriate audience. What I find useful is looking through my notes when I was kind of beginning my journey and kind of starting to understand IT in general and then cybersecurity. Because if I can put myself back in that mindset of when I first learned those things, I find myself being able to explain those things in simpler terms to people. So yeah, it's just about approaching it from a beginner's point of view in certain cases. And at other times, just putting on your more technical hat and speaking to people in that way.
Yeah. And I guess not assuming that everybody knows the same stuff you know, right? And that's really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have a tendency sometimes to speak in a lot of jargon and trying to flabbergast people with technical terminology. And it's something that I always try to dial back as much as possible and just speak in as simple terms as possible just to get the message across.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, well, Vix, thank you very much indeed for that. It was brilliant, really, really good. Some excellent feedback coming in on the Twitch. We're now going to break for lunch, so you've got an hour. We'd like to see you all back at around about 13:20 GMT UK time. But again, Vix, very much appreciate your time. Thank you very much for taking the time to come and talk to us. Brilliant.
Thank you.